What happens when a society tries to heal a profound, deep-rooted wound by only treating the surface? Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're exploring Cornel West's provocative and deeply challenging analysis of American society in his landmark book, Race Matters. We're going to unpack West's precise diagnosis of the societal diseases affecting the nation, and more importantly, we'll walk through his proposed cures for how we can finally achieve a genuine multiracial democracy.
To answer this fundamental question, we have to start by confronting some deeply uncomfortable realities. As West points out, the American democratic experiment has historically failed to curb the use of arbitrary powers against Black citizens. Just think about the historical weight of that. Decades of redlining, unequal policing, and skewed justice systems. The legacy of white supremacy lingers in modern institutions, which means the ultimate litmus test for the health of American democracy is exactly how broad and how intense these arbitrary powers are deployed across the color line today.
Now, there's a striking paradox here. We have absolutely seen undeniable racial progress. We've witnessed the piercing of glass ceilings by extraordinary professionals of color, from CEOs to cultural icons. Yet, right alongside that massive success, the underlying structural rot remains devastating. We are living in a reality of simultaneous extraordinary achievement and systemic devastation, particularly within the criminal justice system, where the legacy of those arbitrary powers is felt the most. Consider this staggering statistic drawn directly from West's research. While Black Americans consume roughly 12% of illegal drugs in the country, they suffer nearly 70% of the drug convictions. Let the sheer weight of that disparity sink in for a moment. It perfectly illustrates the disproportionate application of police power. You see, these aren't just numbers on a page. They're clear indicators of lingering inequalities that demand our urgent attention if we truly want to move forward. Here is our agenda for this analysis. We'll be moving from West's diagnosis to his proposed cure, covering the threat of nihilism, the leadership void, the trap of racial reasoning, moving beyond liberals and conservatives, overcoming divides and taboos, and finally, the politics of conversion. Section 1. The threat of nihilism, a disease of the soul. West argues that the most basic issue facing Black America today isn't merely economic or political. It's a terrifying threat of nihilism. And we're not talking about some abstract philosophical concept here. West defines it as the lived daily experience of coping with a life of horrifying meaninglessness, hopelessness, and lovelessness. It breeds a cold-hearted detachment and a self-destructive disposition. So where does this stem from? Well, West points directly at systemic poverty, a pervasive market-driven culture of consumption that edges out genuine care, and the shattering of crucial cultural institutions that once buffered communities against this deep despair. Section 2. The leadership void, quantity versus quality. Facing this terrifying nihilistic threat, communities desperately need strong guidance. Yet, West points out a tragic irony. We have a higher quantity of Black politicians and intellectuals today than ever before, but a remarkably low quality of actual leadership. He breaks modern political leadership down into 3 distinct types. First, you have race-effacing managers, who survive on political savvy and personal diplomacy to gain mainstream acceptance. Second, you have race-identifying protest leaders, who act as turf protectors, focusing on nationalist sentiments. But what we truly lack and desperately need are the rare race-transcending prophets. These are leaders marked by profound moral vision, deep personal integrity, and courageous defiance, aiming for fundamental social change. Section 3. The trap of racial reasoning, authenticity versus ethics. This crisis in leadership became glaringly obvious to West during the Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill confirmation hearings. He argues that those hearings expose the deep flaws of what he calls racial reasoning. Racial reasoning relies on a false, restrictive sense of Black authenticity, which creates a dangerous closing ranks mentality. In the case of the Thomas hearings, West observes that many felt trapped into defending a conservative nominee simply because they shared the same skin color, largely ignoring his actual policies or character. And the tragedy here, West points out, is that this closing of ranks almost always happens at the direct expense of Black women, subordinating their rights to preserve a united front. So, West argues we must completely abandon this trap and replace it with moral reasoning. A moral reasoning alternative evaluates leaders and ideas based purely on ethical principles. It openly assesses diverse perspectives, rather than demanding one single, rigid, authentic voice. It relies on a principled coalition strategy across different groups. And most importantly, it actively promotes a cultural democracy that entirely rejects patriarchy and homophobia, because a true push for justice absolutely cannot leave anyone behind. Section 4. Beyond liberals and conservatives, the dialectical approach. To truly grasp these interconnected crises, West insists we have to break free from our narrow, paralyzing political frameworks. On one side, we have liberal structuralists. West notes that they naively treat people only as economic creatures, focusing on government programs while ignoring the deep cultural and spiritual decay happening within communities. On the flip side, we have conservative behaviorists. He argues that they cruelly demand behavioral changes and bootstrap self-help without acknowledging the inhumane structural circumstances and crushing poverty that shaped those very behaviors. To find lasting solutions, we have to look past both. Section 5. Overcoming divides and taboos. The LA upheaval and interdependence. When we fail to look beyond those two flawed political perspectives, we completely misinterpret major societal events. A prime example is the 1992 Los Angeles upheaval. Mainstream media immediately labeled it a straightforward race riot, but the data tells a much more complex story. Only 36% of those arrested were Black. A massive 64% were non-Black, including Latinos, whites, and Asians. West explains that this wasn't just a racial clash, it was a multiracial trans-class display of justified social rage, fueled by severe economic decline and a total sense of powerlessness. This kind of multiracial rage forces us to acknowledge our deep interracial interdependence. As West powerfully states, the paradox of race in America is that our common destiny is more pronounced and imperiled precisely when our divisions are deeper. We are inextricably tied together, and because of that, we must bravely face incredibly complex tensions that we usually shy away from, like Black-Jewish relations, and dismantle societal taboos, like the obsessive ways American culture views Black sexuality. True healing requires pulling these topics out of the shadows. Section 6. The politics of conversion, a cure for the soul. So, after diagnosing the roots of our societal decay, what is Cornel West's proposed cure? He calls for a politics of conversion. This is a grassroots movement of the soul. It requires us to, first, confront the threat of nihilism directly. Second, it requires cultivating a profound love ethic and self-affirmation to tackle that disease of the soul. Third, it means rolling up our sleeves to build vital, grassroots democratic organizations on a local level. And finally, it demands that we foster collective, accountable leadership rather than waiting around for a single messiah figure to save us. He reminds us that while economic and structural changes are absolutely vital, overcoming a deep sense of meaninglessness requires something profoundly human. West writes, "Nihilism is not overcome by arguments or analyses, it is tamed by love and care. Any disease of the soul must be conquered by a turning of one's soul. You simply cannot legislate away hopelessness. It requires genuine care, localized community building, and fiercely affirming the self-worth of the downtrodden right where they live." The stakes for our society literally couldn't be higher. West warns that we are standing at a critical crossroads. We must either learn a completely new language of empathy and compassion, or we risk consuming ourselves in a destructive fire of xenophobia, despair, and collective paranoia. So I leave you with this final provocative thought to reflect on today. Which path will we choose as we face the deeply rooted problems of the 21st century together? Will we fall into the comfortable yet destructive traps of racial reasoning and political polarization? Or will we do the difficult, messy, and absolutely necessary work of embracing the politics of conversion to forge a genuine, empathetic, multiracial democracy?